catch him! Shit, don't shoot! I want to join up with you guys, I swear. I know things.
Take him to the captain. See if he sticks.
Roger that. On your feet, you.
You will regret this. I swear. You there!
Hey! Give me that!
In the early days, right after the dollar flu broke out, all attention and resource was placed on containing the virus and reducing the spread of infection. The infected were rounded up and isolated into an area where the best doctors could be brought in to find a cure, but also to stop the illness from dispersing out into the wider population. The government placed absolute priority on the well-being of the public and ensuring that loss of life was kept to a minimum. However, this is New York, the home of Wall Street, the home of the largest and most prestigious stock market in the world. The large Wall Street companies also wanted to ensure that their assets are being protected during the outbreak. Watching the situation quickly escalate, they predicted that the government wasn't going to be able to keep the peace for long, so they brought in some outside help to defend their various corporate interests, and this is where we're introduced to the Last Man Battalion. The Last Man Battalion, or LMB, are a private military company made up of US military veterans, who were brought aboard by their leader, Charles Bliss, who himself was a former US Army officer. Charles Bliss was a lieutenant colonel in the United States Armed Forces. He was proud of the uniform, and he knew from the moment that he first put it on that he would continue to serve long after he leaves the military behind. Bliss leads with an iron fist. Duty, honor, strength, these are just a few words that you could use to describe his character. He is respected by his men, who would follow him to the gates of hell if he asked it of them. After he retired from the armed forces, he decided to work in the private security sector, and this is where he created the Last Man Battalion. In the early days of the outbreak, Bliss was contacted by one of the corporate leaders of Wall Street.
Hi, Rick, it's Charles. I got your message regarding the situation in New York, and I think you're absolutely right. Things are going to get out of hand, faster than the government realizes. They're going to lose control before they've even signed the deployment orders. If you ask me, the only thing that's going to work is to impose absolute authority on the population. People are scared and angry, and that's when they'll act stupid and risk the lives of others. I've seen it too many times. Now you want to shut those instincts down and enforce zero tolerance. Anything beyond that is not going to produce results. And in the long run, that will cost you a lot more than hiring my people.
After convincing several corporations to employ his forces, the LMB were deployed in Manhattan with the goal of protecting their physical assets by any means necessary, until the situation had been resolved and the city was back to normal. As the crisis worsened, many of these companies left the city, but the LMB remained and continued to protect the sites. As time went by, Bliss and his forces saw the city go from bad to worse. Sick of the indecisive local authorities and the government's complete lack of ability to control the situation, Bliss was growing tired of standing by and watching the city fall into complete chaos. By the time that the general public realized that this was more than just a bad flu outbreak, Bliss had come to the conclusion that there was no point in handing over his men's lives in order to protect some physical assets, because at the rate things were going, there would be no one coming back to use them. After the JTF withdrew from the city, Bliss decided that it was up to the LMB to restore order to New York.
You can see the results of relying on the Joint Task Force right here in the middle of Manhattan. That's what they're calling the Dark Zone. That's a melodramatic way of saying it's a region of complete lawlessness. No surveillance and total lack of ability to enforce control. That is something you cannot have on your watch. Sir, I thought the purpose was to evacuate. And how did that work out? Sure, they got the people out, but what did they let back in? And all the equipment and hardware they left behind? We're talking amateurs here, in charge of public safety in one of the biggest cities in the country. Yes, sir. The point is, this just proves that our operations are more efficient. Methodical expansion, civilian processing, enhanced interrogation. We're working at twice the efficiency with half the manpower. The fact that the JTF failed miserably with the Dark Zone is the same reason this city needs the Last Man Battalion.
Bliss broke his contract with his Wall Street employers and proceeded to disobey direct orders, which ended up with him executing a JTF official. This action had Bliss and his entire company labelled as mutineers and enemies of the government. Convinced that not just New York but the whole country will collapse under the spread of the virus, Bliss tells his people that the LMB will use any and all means necessary to make sure they and the city survive, but only a strong hand could salvage and restore what was left. With their financial backing now gone, Bliss would now have to assess the available resources and plan every step of the way.
What we need to do is assess our resources and define our mission statement. The statement is clear. We must retake control. And with the resources we have left, it's also clear we can't afford any half measures. Every soldier counts. Every soldier is a critical resource. There are no reinforcements being deployed. There is no air support. We work slow and steady. We secure the city sector by sector, and then we hold them for dear life. I need you all to be on your feet, ready to make some quick decisions. It's better to shoot someone innocent than to let someone guilty get away. And it's better to shoot first than to risk being shot, even if you're not 100% sure. That's how we will win this war. That's how we will save this city. Collateral damage is to be expected.
For civilians left in Manhattan, this was a nightmare. The LMB were running the area demanding absolute control, with zero tolerance for disobedience or differing point of view. Any dissent or even questioning of the LMB's operations would result in instant retaliation, with even minor incidents resulting in death at the hands of the LMB soldiers. In an attempt to keep numbers boosted, the LMB would often kidnap JTF and members of other factions that they saw as beneficial to their cause, and give them the offer of either joining up or being killed. The LMB are equipped with cutting-edge equipment and gear, almost at the same caliber as the division agents. But when Charles Bliss agreed to meet up with former First Wave Division agent Erin Keener, Bliss's intentions were to close this technology gap. Bliss and Keener came to an agreement. Erin Keener is able to utilize the LMB to run missions, and Bliss gets access to Keener's shade technology. Although he accepts the alliance with Erin Keener, Bliss criticized how much this deal benefited Erin Keener more than him. In one of their first missions, Keener gives the LMB coordinates for their surface-to-air missiles to strike.
I think we need to modify the terms of our agreement.
Why, Colonel? It seems to be working perfectly well so far. You get the support of my people and their gear with field intel you couldn't dream of 6 weeks ago. I get a base of operations, a place on what's going to be the winning side, and the occasional use of your manpower as needed.
Not to mention the occasional surface-to-air missile. Or have you forgotten about that chopper in Brooklyn?
Look, my people did the dirty work on that op, Bliss, and eliminating Division Senior Command was as much a benefit to you as to me. The last thing either of us wanted was a senior division agent directing a second wave. Hang on, I'm getting feedback on the link.
We've been compromised?
Looks like it. Coming the link now.
No, don't you.
The target is a helicopter carrying the Second Wave Division commander, along with a number of other Second Wave agents. It was a direct hit, killing the commander and a large number of the Second Wave Division agents. Keener and the LMB have succeeded. From their point of view, it's safe to assume that they've put an end to any further interference from the division, as they're now leaderless and few in number. It wasn't until the division picked up an SHD transponder signal that the LMB would next encounter the Second Wave agents. It was located in the basement of the New York Police Academy. The division pushed through an operation to retrieve the transponder and were met with heavy resistance from the LMB. Even with rogue agents in their ranks, the LMB failed to defend the site, and at this stage the division are now aware of the First Wave agents working for the other side. Next, the JTF intercepted a signal coming from the Russian consulate. Vitaly Tynenko, a Russian scientist, claims to have information on the green poison, so the division agents were quickly sent in to extract him. However, Keener and the LMB were one step ahead. While the division agents were tied up with the LMB, 2 rogue agents capture Vitaly and manage to escape in a helicopter. At this point, the LMB is starting to suffer. The communications hub at Queens Tunnel construction site was taken down by the division and JTF, and the Grand Central Station, which acted as a strategic forward base, also met an abrupt end at the hands of the division. On top of that, the amount of supplies, ammunition and manpower lost at these sites are now starting to be felt, putting strain on the remaining LMB forces. Bliss and the LMB have now been pushed back to their main HQ, the United Nations building. It's here that alongside Keener and his rogues that the LMB will make their last stand. The JTF and the division launch a huge attack. The majority of the LMB are killed in the UN building as the division agents sweep through. It's then discovered that Keener and his rogues have abandoned the LMB, taking Tynenko with them. After Keener betrays him and leaves the LMB for dead, Bliss is thrown into a state of rage, but he decided to deal with the Second Wave agents storming the General Assembly before going after Keener. Bliss displays his true self, showing loyalty and honor by staying by his men and fighting to the death rather than simply escaping from the complex in his personal helicopter. The division clears the LMB command and then heads into direct combat with the leader of the Last Man Battalion. Bliss's helicopter was shot down and destroyed, killing Bliss. The remaining LMB personnel evacuated the building, most going into hiding in the underground. After Bliss's death, the LMB was scattered across the city, but they're not down and out yet. Captain Perez takes position to continue Bliss's work. He rallies the remaining LMB forces and heads to the Warren Gate water treatment plant. There, they intercept a JTF squad who have discovered a functioning armoured personnel carrier. News of this reached the government. They decided that the best course of action would be to bomb the plant before the LMB take it out onto the streets of Manhattan. The division disagreed, saying that loss of the water treatment plant will only slow down the progress towards rebuilding the city. So the division launched an attack against the LMB to shut them down before the government can blow up the building. After a lengthy, some would say repetitive battle, the agents were successful in stopping the LMB and taking down the APC, with Captain Perez inside. It's unknown who is leading the LMB at this stage, but they continue to regroup and organise smaller attacks around the city. News of Erin Keener's appearance on the West Side Pier had the LMB command calling for a truce with the Rikers and Cleaners. Their attention has been turned to finding the man that betrayed them and their former commander. Though not all LMB personnel agree with this move, as they see their training and discipline as far beyond the other factions, and that the Rikers and Cleaners are useless and a waste of time. But there is one thing that they do all agree on, that Keener must be found. Although the LMB had good training, cutting-edge equipment, military precision, and strong organisation, they were still able to be pulled apart by the division agents and the JTF. Things started going wrong for them when some of the basic foundations of their organisation started getting cut off. Communication systems were destroyed, forward strongholds lost, and their supplies were seized by government forces. They were eventually locked down in the United Nations building, and this was the final nail in the coffin. Firstly, Keener abandoned them, taking the rogue agents and Vitaly Tanenko with them, and then finally Bliss, refusing to leave his men behind, succumbed to the JTF and the division attack. The LMB are not fully done and dusted. Even after Bliss's death, they continue to regroup and fight, but now on a much smaller, less threatening scale. For the JTF and division agents in New York City, the Last Man Battalion was the last faction capable of stopping them in their goal of restoring order and rebuilding the city. But here's the funny thing, when you think about it, the Last Man Battalion isn't so different to the division. A private army of highly skilled agents, answerable only to the president and otherwise are above the law, empowered to use lethal force to further their ends. Sound familiar? Kinda makes you wonder. Anyway, thanks for watching, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!
From the first time I put on a uniform, I knew I was on the path to become the man I was destined to be. I knew I had accepted a burden that was going to last a lifetime. And even when I left our country's military behind, my obligation for service remained. That obligation is one I and all the men and women of the Last Man Battalion take seriously. We will get the job done. We will serve with honor and dignity, and we will, if necessary, fight to the very last man. Because that is who we are and what we do. The Last Man Battalion. Security you can count on.